Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
And welcome back to FPL graduates, and welcome back to another video where in this video we're going to be going through some transfer targets for game week 20. Of course, it's been a very hectic time with this festive season. We're just coming towards the end of that now with game week 20 coming up. Hopefully, you should be able to sort of catch your breath just a little bit with those decisions that you've got. We're going to sort of delve a little bit deeper into what we think you should be doing with your transfers going into game week 20.
Yes, so as always, we'll start with the defenders and move our way through into each position. Starting off with a premium defender as well, Trent Alexander-Arnold, come off the back of that 15-point haul against West Ham away last week. Massive return for owners if you did move on him. I personally had myself. Lucky with the goal a little bit, but I think everyone knew that sort of level of return was coming with him. It was just a matter of time, and it was against West Ham this week. The 5 attacking returns so far this season, 1 goal, 4 assists, splitting down to sort of matching his expected goal involvement. As me and Ben have mentioned in previous videos, his attacking threat is not off the scale like we've seen in years gone by, but it will tick along quite nicely and is still one of the league leaders in that sort of regard. Probably unlucky not to get more returns, I thought, against West Ham. He put a couple on the plate for Salah, who managed to miss 4 big chances in that game. It could have been a crazy, crazy haul. United at home, Forest away, Brentford away the next 3, Ben. The fixture runs nice for Liverpool, right? And if there's a time to hop on, it's probably now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, obviously, the away fixtures, perceived to be a little bit more difficult, but Liverpool is just a machine at the moment in terms of output. And Trent's looking fantastic. When he does get an attacking return, it's almost sort of like switching sort of the bonus points on his head. He is actually getting into bonus points quite a considerable number of times, which is really good to see. And that's mainly down to sort of the big chance involvement that he does have, and he's usually creating rather than sort of missing those big chances, which really helps him out. So yeah, Trent Alexander-Arnold is one of the transfers in to be making. There's no reason why you shouldn't think about getting him in at least. Of course, budgets mean that you're going to have to invest a little bit more in the defence to bring him in, but I do think he is worthwhile, that investment, especially with the fixtures coming up. Like, I see him hauling against Manchester United at home, no doubt in my mind. I think that's going to happen because it's just a prime opportunity for him to do so. And I remember sort of in the reverse fixture, he nearly did just that. So yeah, I think he is a fantastic option and one you should be absolutely considering. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about Milenkovic from Nottingham Forest. He is on 6 returns out of his last 7 games, which is absolutely ridiculous for the run. And it's not just been clean sheets either. It's been a couple of attacking returns in there as well. Nottingham Forest are looking like one of the best sort of teams in terms of expected goals conceded. And there's it's a team that's really gone under the radar a little bit for a lot of FPL managers, and I think now's the time to sort of consider investing into that defence because the fixtures are looking quite decent. And in terms of rotating players in and out in the defensive positions, I think Milenkovic works really, really well with a lot of other assets. So yeah, Josh, what's your thoughts on Milenkovic and in general that Nottingham Forest defence?
Yeah, I really like him. I think 4.7 is not a bad price to pay. I know obviously you mentioned the rotation as well, but you could consider Nottingham Forest defenders one of those teams that you could maybe play against anyone. They seem like they can keep a clean sheet most weeks at the moment. Same with Milenkovic as well. Obviously, his goal threat from set pieces is ridiculous. It's nearly verging on that sort of Gabriel level. So really high, when we talk about that expected goal involvement, that is mainly XG, which is, huge for a defender when they're getting 6 points for a goal. So yeah, I like him a lot. Obviously the fixtures right now for Forest are pretty decent. Wolves away and Southampton at home in the next 3. You'd imagine there'll be at least 2 clean sheets within that. So yeah, should be an interesting run. But there are also a cheaper alternative if you're looking a bit more, budget restricted, if you want to get into that Forest defence. And that is Nico Williams. He's coming in at 4.3 million. A slight maybe rotation risk with Alex Moreno waiting in the wings, but he has started the last 4 games in the Premier League for Nottingham Forest. And he's basically kept Moreno out of the team with some really high quality performances. 5 clean sheets when he has played as well, which is pretty decent considering he has played such a low amount of minutes, only the 900 so far this season. He picked up an attack and return the other week as well for that 11-pointer. He's just been very consistent. I think him himself as well, he's got like 3 returns in the last 3 as well. So what's the thoughts on Williams, Ben? Would you sort of prioritise the 0.4 for the safety with Milenkovic, or do you think, if you can't afford that far, Williams is a decent option?
If you've got the money, I'd prioritise Milenkovic just for the safety of returns and the safety of minutes, because there's nothing worse than bringing an asset and within 2 to 3 game weeks having to transfer him back out, especially for a team such as Nottingham Forest, who do look like they're going to sustain the defensive numbers. So you're going to want to invest into them quite a lot. And when he does inevitably get rotated out, it is going to happen. You're going to want to bring in an alternative Forest defender anyway. So yeah, I'd maybe save that sort of transfer down the road. If you are really constrained by the budget, then I see no reason why not to go for him. But if you do have that sort of 4.7 in the bank, or 4.7 ready to spend on a defender, which most FPL managers are going to have anyway, I'd definitely consider Milenkovic over Nico Williams, just for that, safety aspect. Okay, so next up is a player who has really started to play well and coincided with this good run of form for Newcastle. It's Lewis Hall. Of course, at the start of the season, there was some question marks on the minutes that he would get. They're so secure now, especially now Trippier came off injured again against Manchester United. He is looking like probably one of the top 2 defenders or left backs anyway in the Premier League with Robinson. The attacking returns are looking really good. On the eye, he is looking fantastic. He's producing a lot of attacking returns, a lot of XGI, a lot of assist potential rather than the goal threat himself, which is really good to see. And because of the quality of striker that he's got in Alexander Isak, he's getting a lot of returns off, not too much sort of high XGI involvements, which is really good to see. And of course, they're starting to tick along now with some clean sheets as well. Josh, I've had Lewis Hall for quite a while now. Is he one that, FPL managers should be absolutely considering to bring in?
I think he's definitely one to consider. For me, I'd be more worried about the clean sheets, though, going into those next 3 games. I think, Tottenham, Bournemouth and Wolves have all shown that they can score goals in abundance as well in recent weeks. Wolves will have Cunha back for that game as well, which will be important for them. So yeah, I think you're going to be relying on the attack and returns a little bit more. But what is good is that obviously Lewis Hall has been showing that from crossing a lot, and his link up with Anthony Gordon as well. It's been really, really good for Newcastle in the last few weeks. So he would be in my consideration. I'm not sure if he's near the top. You've got Fulham with some really, really nice fixtures. You got Daniel Munoz with really high goal threat. So it's like a wrestling match between a lot of cheap options, but he'd definitely be in my consideration. And obviously, if you own him already, then you're not going to be selling him anytime soon. Okay, then, so our final defender for this video is going to be Timothy Castagna at 4.2 million. As I just mentioned, Fulham's fixture run right now is arguably the best in the league for the next 6. Next 3, Ipswich at home, West Ham away, Leicester away. They are fantastic fixtures. Obviously, West Ham also without Jarrod Bowen, who is out injured now with a fractured foot. 4.2 million as well. It's just such a joke of a price. Obviously, you'd be sustained in the team for at least the next month, maybe month and a half, whilst Kenny Tete is out. So if you're needing a bit of a stopgap in that time, then he's fantastic. Obviously, he's like 0.6 cheaper than Anthony Robinson. So that is the main draw here. If you can afford Anthony Robinson, I personally would say go and get him. His attacking threat and also minutes in general, he's been nailed for about 3 seasons long now, Anthony Robinson. So, yeah, really safe asset there. But obviously, if you're budget restricted, then this is a really nice option. Playing as a right wing back in this like new 3-back, 5-back, whatever you want to call it, formation for Fulham. If that sustains, I think we could see a lot more attacking threat from him. What's your thoughts on Castagna, Ben?
I'm surprisingly not as hot on Castagna as sort of some other FPL managers may be, and that is because of the threat of Kenny Tete in terms of the potential of him sort of being rotated out. Of course, the next 2 or 3 looked fantastic, but past the next 2, maybe 3 fixtures, there is going to be that element of rotation risk quite early on because, of course, as we know in January, there's sort of not as many game weeks as there are in November, December, because there's a few sort of different breaks in terms of like FA Cup weekends, etc. So it's definitely one to consider from that aspect, is that it'll be sort of sooner rather than later that there is a little bit of risk. But at 4.2 million, like, it's cheap enough that you can sort of afford to sort of bring him in, bring him out again when he starts sort of not playing. And he's low owned enough, and I think he'll stay low owned enough that you can afford to do that without sort of the threat of too many price drops. If a load of people obviously bring him in and he hauls against Ipswich, then again, you won't have to worry too much about that aspect of it either. But, I think he's a good option for the price point. It's just one that is, in my opinion, quite a short-term pick. Okay, so the first midfielder we're going to talk about is Anthony Gordon of Newcastle. And wow, Newcastle just look to be in fantastic form. It feels like we've spoken about Gordon so many times already this week from the first couple of videos that we've done. But he is in really good form and he's linking up really well with Lewis Hall. And the returns and the expected goal involvement is increasing week on week, and Newcastle just looking better and better. From an attacking perspective, the fixtures are really good for Newcastle going forwards. We've seen Wolves concede many. We've seen Tottenham sort of arguably one of the worst defensive teams in the league. So the returns are there for the taking for Anthony Gordon. I do think there are sort of potential for, some really high hauls, which we haven't seen too many of them so far this season from Gordon, but we just know that they are around the corner with how good that they are looking. Josh, what's your thoughts on Gordon?
Yeah, I think he's arguably one of the best midfield options to go to if you're looking to make a transfer this week. We obviously had him on last week's transfer targets as well. 6 returns in his last 7 games, and the only game that he's blanked, he got rested in and came off the bench for 30 minutes. So, yeah, you're looking at a guy who's going to be really consistent. Obviously, Ben mentioned in the hauls there, I think they are due, but, even if he's still ticking along with a return every game, like you're going to be absolutely laughing with that. The fixtures for me from an attacking perspective is much better than a defensive perspective for Newcastle. Tottenham, Wolves and Bournemouth, they're not the best defences in the league, that's for sure. So I think there will still be consistent returns going on. And obviously with Isak's increase in ownership, 6 returns on the bounce for him, I think we're going to need to, sooner rather than later, have another sort of asset to that Newcastle attack. And Anthony Gordon is a perfect way into it. Okay, then, so next up is going to be a Liverpool attacker, and it is going to be Luis Diaz. And he's got a decent little record on him at the moment. 16 big chance involvements, the 11 attack and return so far this season. He's been performing to a high standard. And also he's very versatile, which I think is one of the biggest draws to him. He can play across the front three if needed. Obviously, we've seen him a lot in the false 9 role as well on the left. But since Cody Gakpo's come into form, he's been mainly playing down the middle. Obviously, the biggest debate with these Liverpool attackers is the minutes. And obviously, myself and Ben brought in Diogo Jota a couple of weeks ago, expecting probably more minutes from him than we've got so far. I think those minutes will come, and it could be, a question mark around Luis Diaz. Does Diaz continue playing, or does he drop out for Diogo Jota? The fixtures are there for Liverpool from an attacking point of view. I know there's no green in the next 3, but I feel like United at home right now is definitely a green fixture for Liverpool, and Brentford away as well. It's a poor defence to be playing against. So, yeah, I like the fixtures. What's your thoughts now, Ben? Obviously, maybe bias removed. Who would you go for a Liverpool attacker if you didn't own Jota already?
Absolutely Diaz. In my opinion, I think we both thought from a Jota perspective that he'd get 90 minutes in one of the next 2 or the previous 2 fixtures, which hasn't happened. And it just shows now more than ever. Arne Slot doesn't like to rotate too much in terms of the minutes compared to maybe Klopp went in previous years, etc. So I think Luis Diaz, in terms of minutes, is relatively secure, sort of compared to someone like Jota or Darwin, etc. So I do think he's a good buy. I'd almost be tempted to hold off for that 23-24 and sort of just hold off to see whether that, who's playing all the minutes when that double comes round, because we could see maybe a shift gradually over the next sort of 4 or 5 game weeks in terms of who's getting the minutes. So it may be worth sort of waiting and seeing, because, for myself, I'll probably look to move on Jota this week, and I probably won't go to Diaz. I'll probably wait to buy that third Liverpool asset just to see, who's getting the minutes. So I really like him as an FPL asset. The fixtures are there. It's almost sort of a waiting game with the Liverpool assets to an extent, which is slightly frustrating because obviously whoever you get nailed on starting is gonna get returns, but it may be the most sensible thing to do in this situation. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about Anthony Elanga, and again he has just hit some serious form. I can't remember how many returns it is in a row. It must be 4 or 5 returns in a row now, which is genuinely incredible for 5.2 million. He is such good value. Of course, we seem to be having this year the emergence of a lot of really cheap, really decent options, which is really helpful for managers to rotate in and out the likes of Alanga, Morgan Rogers, etc. So, yeah, he's looking in good form. The fixtures are absolutely there for Nottingham Forest. Maybe slight sort of minutes risk in terms of sort of rotating in and out slightly, but they seem to be secure over the last 4 game weeks or so. Josh, are you in the sort of consideration of Anthony Alanga?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at that sort of £5 million price point with the Enzos, the Amads, the Rogers, you definitely got to bring this guy into consideration now. He's been super consistent the last 4. The link up with Chris Wood for that goal against Everton was really nice, and it's nice to see. They have so many options in those wide areas. I don't think we've seen an outstanding option just yet, and I think Anthony Alanga is emerging as one of those. So yeah, really nice fixtures. 5.2 million. So, like, if the worst case scenario is going to get benched in a couple of games, like, it's not going to cost you much. Like I say, this is like one of these 8th attackers that I'd have alongside a Morgan Rogers or an Ahmad or a João Pedro to rotate in and out for those good fixtures. It wouldn't be someone who I'd rely on week in, week out, but I think he's a good option for the price you're paying. Performing relatively near his data as well. So it's not as if, there's a massive over performance there. And even in the tough fixtures like that Liverpool at home game, obviously Forest have beaten Liverpool already this year. And I think this is the kind of player that you'd want in that fixture where it's, he's going to get in behind those fullbacks like we've seen Andrew Robertson be sort of, I guess, scapegoated for so far this season. Okay, then. So one of his teammates as well is Morgan Gibbs-White. Obviously picked up the double-digit haul against Everton with that lovely goal for them against... let me start again. I'm just saying Everton 4 times. Okay, then. So another midfield option from Nottingham Forest that I've seen a lot of people considering on Twitter mainly is Morgan Gibbs-White. Obviously he picked up that double-digit haul against Everton at the weekend. It's an interesting one for me. He's actually only played 90 minutes once in his last 5 games, which is not something that I'd think about when it comes to Morgan Gibbs-White. Don't get me wrong, he's played the majority of minutes in those games, 75 plus, but he has been getting the odd early sub here and there. The same amount of returns as Alanga so far this season, and obviously Alanga is £1.1 million cheaper. For me, I'd be opting towards Alanga rather than Gibbs-White, although you do get more minute security, despite me saying that he gets taken off a little bit early. What's your thoughts on Gibbs-White, Ben? Obviously, he's not quite that talismanic figure for Forest. Obviously, he's got set pieces, but that's about it, right?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for someone that ticks along with somewhat of a consistency, Morgan Gibbs-White does do that, and to an element. Obviously, Alanga's been in such red-hot form that I think you've almost got to go for him to sort of try and keep on the sort of hauls that he's getting. But if you're looking for someone to sort of tick along quite nicely in that Forest team, I think he will do that job. And we saw consistency from him last season in terms of attacking returns in a Forest team that was much worse than the one we're seeing right now. So we know he can do it from an FPL perspective. So especially over these next few fixtures, I think, Chris Wood's going to end up being sort of quite a high ownership. It's almost worth having, maybe a second one to consider for Forest. Okay, so next up we've got Ismaila Sarr from Crystal Palace. Of course, last week against Southampton, he didn't end up returning. I transferred him in myself. For owners, though, that was really unlucky. He had an XGI of over 1 in that game and should have come away with return on another day. That's a double-digit haul that we're looking at. So from that perspective, it's almost good for current owners, but I do not think you should disregard him as an asset because Crystal Palace's fixtures are fantastic. The underlying data, just like Munoz, is fantastic for Ismaila Sarr, almost playing as that second striker for Crystal Palace, which is really, really good. Of course, there's not the set pieces or the penalties that come along with Ismaila Sarr, but the price tag is really good at 5.9 million and looking in good form as well. Josh, is this a player that you've considered?
Yeah, I definitely would be considering him if I needed the midfield coverage. For me, he's still a better option than Eze, despite Eze returning over him against Southampton. At half-time of that game, Sarr had one big chance missed, one big chance created. Eze had 0 big chance involvement. So it goes to show from open play, Sarr is the better pick. It's just that sometimes, obviously, with the set pieces and that, Eze will chip in here and there. Obviously, the goal as well. It's a low XG opportunity for Eze from outside the box. So, yeah, I think over a longer period of time, I'd much rather Sarr. Obviously, the fixture this week against Chelsea, I don't think it's a bad one. Again, I think it suits Sarr more than Eze in terms of, be in behind that Chelsea backline, who we've seen in recent weeks are really struggling at the moment since obviously losing Fofana in that team. So for me, even this week, if you've got him, I'd be inclined to start him this week. Leicester away and West Ham after that are just, prime fixtures for any attacker going into those games. Guess what? It's another Nottingham Forest player. 5 so far this video. Absolutely mental. But it just goes to show what sort of form their whole team is in for us to be recommending so many of them. Chris Wood finally got his returns. I had him for the last 4 game weeks, 3 blanks, and he finally got it against Everton. The fixtures coming up for Nottingham Forest are really good, hence why there's so many of them in this video. 11 goals, 1 assist so far this season. The 16 big chance involvement. He's just like super, super clinical. I love him as an FPL asset. You just know what you're going to get. He's not going to be anything fancy. He's not going to come away with, 5 goals or anything like that. But he's just going to get those consistent returns, maybe every other game week, which is all you need from someone who's only going to cost you, £6.5 million. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Do you think where would you rank him right now in terms of those forwards?
It's got to be sort of within the top 4 in terms of forwards to own in FPL at the moment. He is looking in really good form, and I do think he's the best Forest asset to own as well because of the consistency that we're seeing in returns and also in the minutes that he's getting, and as well in terms of the penalties as well. It's all sort of like one sort of really decent package that you get him with Chris Wood for 6.7 million. He's at that price point where pretty much all FPL managers are going to be able to afford him as well with the sort of funds that are sort of splashing around in FPL teams at the moment. I do think that he's going to provide really good value for, some teams coming up that they've got. I do think there's probably a double-digit haul coming as well. Like he's been sort of consistent in singular returns, but he's starting to sort of look like he's going to get those double-digit returns. So we could see some more of them going forward. So no, I really do like him as a pick. And I think his ownership will probably go through the roof after maybe that Southampton at home game. Let's just see. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about a player that I currently own in my FPL team. It's Nicholas Jackson, off the back of a disappointing 1-pointer against Ipswich away after coming off the bench on 55 minutes. He did make an impression, though. He managed to miss an absolute sitter, albeit he was offside. But it's good to see that he's still getting those chances. He is a little bit more expensive compared to Chris Wood, and I do think there's probably, a little bit better value in Chris Wood. But if you're looking for explosivity, I think Nicholas Jackson can provide that because Chelsea, particularly when they play at home, do look like a completely different team to one when they play away. His big chance involvement is absolutely the key here. He's getting involved in so many chances. He's racking up a high amount of XG. So I do think, the double-digit hauls are there to be had, and the potential of him and the ceiling is really, really high of Jackson, whereas I think maybe with Chris Wood, it's sort of a little bit lower down. Josh, of course, I own Jackson. You own Chris Wood. Between the two, is there much to pick between them?
I don't think so. It's like your risk appetite, I think, which it comes down to. For me personally, I think you should have both. Like the ideal front three would be Wood, Jackson, and Isak. I don't think there's anything differentiating from that. So yeah, like you say, I think you've nailed it on the head. The ceiling is much higher with Jackson. He plays in a much better team in terms of their attacking play. They create lots of chances for Jackson in particular. I wouldn't be worried about the minutes now. He's had the rest against Ipswich. We knew that was a possibility going into the fixture run where we've seen it against Southampton. Sanchez has also had that rest. It's the exact same scenario. So yeah, I think going ahead into these games, you're looking pretty decent minutes-wise. I think it's a 6-day break between the Morecambe FA Cup game and the Wolves at home game. So again, I think that's a plethora amount of time for him. Also, I don't expect him to play versus Morecambe. I think we'll see that sort of Conference League side that we've seen with Maresca. He's definitely got 2 teams that he's using at the moment. So yeah, if you're worried about the minutes, I just wouldn't be at all. And then you're also going to get an asset. Okay, he's not been very consistent the last 3 weeks, but he's always going to get big chances in this team that has, Cole Palmer, Sancho, Madueke, lots of players who can create chances for him. Okay, then, so the last player in this transfer targets video, a little bit of a longer video today, is Ollie Watkins. He's obviously come off the back of a double-digit haul last game week against Brighton. In the team again, obviously due to John Duran's suspension, and he's sort of taken it with both hands in terms of the opportunity. Leicester at home this week, obviously not going to be well, there's going to be no John Duran again, but there also is going to be no Morgan Rogers. He's suspended for that fixture, which I think is a bit of a negative if you do own Ollie Watkins or if you are looking at him, because those two link up so well. We saw it for the both goals. I know obviously Rogers won the first penalty, but their link up is really impressive. 8 goals, 4 assists so far this season. What absolutely took my mind away is those 29 big chance involvements. I don't think I've seen anyone with that sort of big chance involvement so far in all of these transfer targets videos. It's been astronomical, the amount of big chances he's involved in. So for 8.8, which is a good price in my opinion, he's come down a bit obviously since getting a few benchings in a row with Duran out. What's your thoughts, Ben? Do you think, obviously, you're trying to predict the future with Duran obviously coming back into the team. Do you think he stays in the team after that Leicester game?
I think Watkins does stay in the team. I think the Duran, if he'd not got that red card, we absolutely wouldn't be talking about Watkins as an option because they are so competitive in there. I think over the short to medium term, good pick. Longer term, maybe sort of that element of rotation risk comes back, but it's not something to worry about too much, especially now with the wild card in hand. There's the ability to shift off Ollie Watkins. And, just like we talked about with Bruno Fernandes in the wildcard video, he can almost become a little bit of your cash cow in terms of, holding the funds there. So if you needed to upgrade or downgrade elsewhere, then he can be that player that you sacrifice, because after the Leicester and Everton game, you can almost sort of say, right now, that's the fixture run sort of coming to somewhat of an end. You can sort of look to move him on. So I think he is a safe home for the next 2. And then if you need to, he can become an easy sell for you as well. So it's, you've almost got the best of both worlds. If he's banging form, you keep him. If he's starting to look like he's slowing down or getting rotated, he then becomes an easy sell for you to sort of move on to sort of the players that are in form.
Okay, then, so that wraps up our Game Week 20 transfer targets. Hopefully you enjoyed the little bit longer format of this one. Obviously, loads of options to choose from. If you need any help with them, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, and as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL Graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
So you